What is a cult? Well, according to definitions, it is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. But is it really that simple? Our research says otherwise. Identifying a cult can be a bit tricky as the line between them and religions are pretty thin. That's why we've created research questions to correctly identify a cult, and later on break down a specific one. But now, let's get into the
What are the defining characteristics of a cult? We'll explore how cults operate, how to identify them, and how their features manifest differently around the world and different types of them. So let's begin by asking the question, what makes a group a cult? So while cults can vary greatly in structure and purpose, they share some common defining characteristics. So oftentimes they're isolated and there's penalties from leaving. There's unquestioning loyalty to leaders, which are oftentimes seen as godlike figures, and there's oftentimes authoritarian leadership, and questions or dissent are not tolerated. There's oftentimes financial opacity, and followers are typically expected to give without question. There's also oftentimes the fear of the outside world. They instill paranoia, framing the world as a dangerous place. And it also vilifies ex-members. So anyone who leaves the group is labeled as foolish, mentally ill, or morally corrupt. So even though these are some more extreme examples, they can include more moderate examples of these symptoms, and not all cults demonstrate all of these symptoms, so just keep that in mind. So let's look at some. While the core characteristics remain the same, cults manifest differently depending on their focus. So there's the type 1, you have the doomsday cults. These groups prepare for an imminent apocalypse, and for example, that you have the branch Davidians who believe that the end of the world was near. And you have political cults. These cults are a political movement that evolve into cult-like status. Some critics say that factions within political organizations, for example, like the Green Party of Canada, is sometimes labeled as cult-like and display cult-like dynamics. There's religious cults. They're religious-based groups, often led by charismatic figures. This would be, for example, the 法轮大法, which we will be talking about later in our presentation today. And there's also sexual cults, which exploit members, and some of them are explicitly centered around that type of stuff. And basically, it's often used as a guise of spiritual or personal growth. So some good indicators of cult activity is, first of all, there's excessive secrecy regarding basically everything, what they do, their finances, their leadership. There's often a us versus them mentality, fear and paranoia of the outside world, and the fear of asking for help. And there's also usually charismatic leadership, and they have a very strong influence over the members. So cults may seem mysterious, but their tactics and behaviors are often predictable and explainable via sociology. So by understanding the characteristics, we can better identify and protect against their influence.
Cults have many different ways of brainwashing and indoctrination, and these are just a couple we found when researching. Cognitive dissonance. By using techniques like foot in the door, where they go from a small request to eventually a big request, this can discourage members to question motives and action. When faced with contradictory evidence, members may experience anxiety and guilt, and will cope by seeking affirmation, dismissing it, or reinterpreting it. Social influence. Human behavior has an inherent need for connection and acceptance. For an example, showing your friends a thing you made, or an accomplishment you achieved. So, when others may reject you, cults will try their best to make you feel valued, and convince you to join them. Peer pressure is also a factor of social influence, as it has worked on all of us and is very effective to get hesitant members to join ceremonies and rituals. Manipulation. Cults exploit vulnerability to emotionally coerce them into doing things they want. The way they do this is through hypnosis and trance, which I don't know how it works, but it involves altering consciousness. Cult leaders allegedly use hypnosis to put ideologies in their members' mind. They do this by using deception, language loading, which is using special words of the language to invoke certain emotions. So that might sound really nerdy and everything, but for an example, if I say healthy, this will probably invoke a positive emotion, while saying something like germs would have a negative emotion. So these processes are repeated several times and can disassociate members, making them feel a disconnect between thoughts and identity. And now that they're in this state, information can be absorbed at a higher rate, and members may start to feel dependent on the cult. Anyways,
Hello everyone, it is me once again. So we're going to be talking about the psychological and social effects of cults. Specifically, we're going to explore why people join cults, how do they feel during their involvement, and the challenges they face after leaving. So why do people join cults in the first place? So first of all, there's the sense of belonging. So cults offer a warm and welcoming environment where like-minded people come together. And so these people who share the like-minded beliefs create a sense of community and belonging that all humans strive for, as everyone seeks validation. And speaking of seeking validation, people often join due to feelings of alienation or exclusion from the general normalcy of society. So they might seek spiritual or psychological comfort that is outside of mainstream society. And there's also circumstances and pressures. For example, there are some people born into cults or guilt tripped into staying, told that they're abandoning their quote unquote family if they leave. And there's other people manipulated into dependence, with cults positioning themselves as like their sole source of purpose, love, belonging, and that kind of stuff. And during cult involvement, some social and psychological effects start to take hold. First of all, there's the loss of individuality, as as members are encouraged to suppress their personal identity for the greater good of the cult and their ability to spread their teachings, etc. And there's also emotional manipulation to maintain control and keep people hooked or prevent them from running away. And members are made to feel as if they're dependent on the cult for their social and emotional needs. And there's often a paranoia about the outside world, which ultimately causes them to spend more and more time in a cult and more reclusive. And what are some of the effects after they leave a cult? Well, first of all, there may be some signs of emotional distress, like looking at certain articles. Former members often experience depression and anxiety while they're still adjusting to life outside the cult. And that can be overwhelming, especially after they've lost their sense of self, belonging, and normalcy in society, and that kind of stuff. And some people, because of this, will face difficulty reintegrating within society because because after years in a structured, isolated environment, they have lost a lot of the skills that they need. And common rebuilding challenges include rebuilding relationships with coworkers, with colleagues, that kind of stuff, establishing normalcy and learning to function in a world without the cult's rules or regulations. And there's also guilt tripping and that kind of stuff, as ex-members can grapple with like lingering fear or threats such as not being able to feel happy outside of the group, and or that nobody can protect them for the group themselves, and all those kinds of things. So while cults deeply impact their members both during and after their involvement, if we can learn to think rationally and identify these symptoms, we can help people reduce their impact and how they will be affected later in life.
But that about sums up all our research questions. Now let's get into.
Have you ever seen people with yellow tacky shirts with these fun, bold blue letters reading Fulan Dafa is good on the side of the road or mall? Well, as you probably guessed, these people are part of the cult known as Fulan Dafa, also known as Fulan Gong. Fulan Dafa is a controversial Chinese spiritual movement founded in 1992 by Li Hongzhi, who is now 72 years old and resides in New York. Fulan Dafa describes itself as a practice combining meditation, Kuzhong exercises, which is just yoga but Chinese, and teachings centered around the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. It emphasizes self-cultivation for spiritual enlightenment and physical health. While many practitioners see it as a pathway to self-improvement, the Chinese government views it as a heretical cult and a potential threat to state control. There have been many controversies surrounding the cult, one of which we will explore in depth. Let's say you are a cult trying to recruit people to fight for your cause. You probably don't want to get into a controversy that will lead to your cult being exposed. Well, not Fulan Dafa. On November 2024, former Shenyu dancer Chang Ko Chang filed a class action lawsuit in New York against Shenyu Performing Arts and its leaders, alleging forced child labor and human trafficking. For some background, Shenyu Performing Arts is closely tied with Fulan Dafa. Performances aim to highlight the three principles of Fulan Dafa. Chang claims that she was recruited from Taiwan at the age of 13, had her immigration documents confiscated upon arrival at New York, and was subject to grueling schedules, public humiliation, and inadequate medical care. Chang also alleges underpayment, only receiving $500 monthly after a year of unpaid work in one of the most expensive cities in the world, New York. The lawsuit seeks damages for Chang and other alleged victims. In response to the lawsuits filed by Chang, Shenyu Performing Arts has accused her of being a member and an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. The organization claims that her legal action is part of a broader campaign orchestrated by the CCP to discredit Shenyu and its affiliated Falun Gong movement. This is pretty stupid, considering they could have just addressed the issue instead of deflecting, like me when my teacher asks me where's my homework, or when Chad or Max asks me to record my lines and I say, "Nuh-uh, I have a bio test," and proceed to play video games for the next 8 hours. Furthermore, if Chang was truly aligned with the CCP, it would be unlikely that she would have joined Shenyu in the first place, given its organization's anti-CCP stance. Even if she was a spy, I don't think the Chinese Communist Party is utilizing 13-year-olds to infiltrate a cult. In addition, she has risked public scrutiny and legal battles by coming forward, which would have been an unusual move for someone allegedly working for the Chinese government. Finally, there have been many dancers who have spoken against Fulan Dafa and its organizations. The organization asserts that 85% of its performers are adults and that student performers receive substantial scholarships to attend affiliated art institutions. These allegations strongly suggest that Fulan Dafa is a cult. The lawsuit claims that Shenyu dancers, many of whom are Falun Gong practitioners, were isolated, had their immigration documents confiscated, and faced strict control over their lives. Traits of a cult that we have mentioned before. The reports of grueling work schedules, unpaid labor, and harsh punishments are indicative of exploitive conditions often found in cult-like groups, where members are expected to sacrifice for a greater cause. Additionally, dancers were allegedly discouraged from seeking medical care, instead being told to rely on meditation for healing, reflecting a rejection of modern healthcare in favor for a faith-based treatment. Those who disobeyed were reportedly punished, reinforcing a system of control and suppression. Fulan Dafa also promotes extreme beliefs, including apocalyptic warnings and the notion that its founder, Li Hongzhi, possesses divine wisdom. Together, these practices are things that cults do and proves that Fulan Dafa is more than just a spiritual movement. Rather, it is a cult. The movement.
No, enough from you. Let's just go on to.
Om Shinrikyo, meaning Supreme Truth, was founded in 1984 by Shoko Asahara in Japan. At first, it presented itself as a yoga and meditation group, drawing upon a mix of different popular beliefs at the time, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Christian apocalypticism. But beneath the surface, it was something far darker. It was a doomsday cult that was convinced that the world was headed towards nuclear Armageddon and that they were the chosen survivors. And like many cults, they targeted the vulnerable, disillusioned youth, the highly educated, or those just searching for deeper meaning in life. But unlike many traditional cults, it didn't just demand loyalty, they demanded action instead of stagnation. So then after that, Om Shinrikyo transformed into a religious movement, into a paramilitary organization, amassed weapons, experimented with chemical and biological agents, and conducted secret killings of those who opposed them. And their belief was that the world was kind of beyond saving. It was a bit cooked, and the only way would be through destruction. They could purify humanity and basically cleanse their sins. And now, transition to March 20th, 1995, in the Tokyo subway stations. This attack shocked the world. On March 20th, 1995, Shinrikyo released sarin gas in the Tokyo subway system, killing 14 people and injuring over 5,000. It was an act of mass terrorism executed with cold precision. Shinrikyo actively sought to bring about the end, making it one of the most dangerous groups in modern history. Strength theory, proposed by sociologist Robert Merton, suggests that when society sets widely accepted goals like success, stability, or fulfillment, but provides unequal access to legitimate means of achieving them, individuals often experience strain, and in response, they adapt in different ways. So you have conformity, innovation, ritualism, retreatism, or rebellion. Cults often emerge from rebellion, rejecting conventional paths and constructing their own alternative systems, which also ties into retreatism. And for many, cults provide an escape to systematic barriers, for example, poverty, alienation, disillusionment with institutions. And when individuals feel blocked from legitimate success, they may turn to charismatic leaders who promise purpose, community, and a new vision of the world. And this, of course, brings us to which explores how certain behaviors are labeled deviant by society. Cults are often viewed as extreme or dangerous, but sociologists argue that deviance is relative. What mainstream culture condemns, subcultures may embrace. According to Howard Becker's labeling theory, deviance isn't inherent, rather, it's assigned by those in power. And this labeling oftentimes reinforces so, what does this tell us about cults? Cults are an enduring sociological phenomenon that won't go away just about anytime soon because of how society is today. They're not just cautionary tales of manipulation, but they're also reflections of the social wrongs and strain within our modern day society, institutional failure, and the deep-rooted desire for meaning and belonging. Understanding them isn't about fear, it's about recognizing the conditions that create them and the patterns that sustain them.
Anyways, that's about it.